FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio. Talk lines are open now at 314-969-9797 or toll free at 866-455-9797. You're listening to The Dana Show.
I've read a number of headlines concerning a number of different sheriffs across the country, and many of them, the vast majority of them, from Oregon to Florida, are very concerned about not just the tone, but some of the decisions that are being made by this administration where it concerns the Second Amendment, all in the name of gun control. And I came across a letter from Sheriff Charles Heiss, who here in Missouri, sheriff in Johnson County. And in his letter, he's written, quote, "As the duly elected sheriff of Johnson County, Missouri, it is my sworn duty to protect and defend the constitutions of the United States of America and the state of Missouri against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. This means I not only have the duty to protect my constituents from incidents of crime, but I also have a duty and responsibility to protect and preserve the individual rights and liberties afforded and guaranteed to every citizen by our constitutions." Joining me on the phone right now is the author of that letter, Sheriff Charles Heiss of Johnson County, Missouri. Sir, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining me. This letter really gets to the heart of the argument because in it you talk about the constitutional right that individuals have to bear arms, but you also talk about really the responsibility of an individual to guarantee their own safety, to be able to protect themselves. Tell us a little bit about why you felt the need to write this letter.
Well, as I said in the early part of the letter, what's concerning to me is the tone of the administration and, and the direction that they're traveling and their willingness to use executive authority or executive orders to impose gun control measures.
Right. And one of the things, too, that I've had a number of different talks with law enforcement about this is they always say, well, it's, the best line of defense is first yourself. And make sure that, you have the ability to protect yourself. I know, in my past, my family went through an incident where we had to look into security and law enforcement here in St. Louis said, well, you need to make sure you have a pistol and go get your concealed carry. And that's what the Constitution affords is an individual's right to protect themselves and to be able to defend their family.
Exactly. And law enforcement is overtaxed in most communities. I have 860 plus square miles of jurisdiction.
Wow.
And so there's a large geographic area that we have to cover. And we have a constitutional right to protect ourselves and to protect our property. And any effort to infringe on that or erode those guarantees is something that causes me great concern. And quite frankly, as an elected official, particularly as an elected law enforcement official, and I've been in this business for 25 plus years, I know firsthand, most generally, we're not going to be there until after the incident has happened.
Right.
And it's too late for us to take actions to save anybody from harm.
And that's something I looked into the response times for folks making 911 calls, and on average across the country, it's about 10 minutes. And usually, I've heard from on record and off record from a number of folks in the law enforcement community, they say, well, by the time that we show up, it's usually we're cleaning something up.
That's exactly right. Now we're in an investigative mode to find out what happened and try to locate those that are responsible for it and hold them accountable. You mentioned average response times being 10 minutes. In rural Missouri, here in Johnson County, I could have a deputy that is out working a night shift and find himself in a bad situation. His closest backup may be 20, 30, 35 miles away.
Wow. Yeah.
And, if that's the case with the deputies, then for the 50 to 70,000 residents here in Johnson County, that could also be the case for them.
Exactly. And individuals being able to protect themselves, that to me, it seems it makes your job in law enforcement easier as well because you and your resources aren't overtaxed.
Exactly. We don't ever want to see innocent people getting hurt. This is not about a desire not to eliminate violent acts in our community. Nobody wants to see people get hurt, particularly children. Nobody wants to see innocent children hurt. But what it is it's about our individual right to protect ourselves and our families. We tend to rely on law enforcement to do that, and that's a bad bet. In lots of parts of our state and our nation, because we just can't be there 24/7. I'm not opposed to common sense approaches to this issue, but the one issue that keeps coming up with me is not only standing up and protecting the rights of people to defend themselves, but how this country, this state and this country, how we're dealing with the mentally ill. Mm-hmm. Our county jails have absolutely become a dumping ground for the mentally ill. And these folks that come in here are maybe sometimes on a medication regime that they've fallen off. We bring them in. They're introduced into the county jail environment. They're put back on that regime. They're turned back to the community. They fall off of that regime again, that regime of medicine that they take, and then they act out violently. Right. We've got to have some serious national discussion on how we're going to deal with the mentally ill in this country.
Absolutely. And in some cases, I know in Pima County in Arizona with Jared Lee Loeffner, it was the college that actually failed to follow their own protocol. They could have had him declared quite easily with his record mentally unfit, and no one sought to do it. And so when they ran that background check on him, he came up clear because no one sought to go forward. And it seems as though we have all of these procedures and protocols in place, but it's very difficult to enact the law when you have folks that aren't picking up the slack in terms of getting these folks reported and following their own procedures.
Yeah, we have those procedures in place, and then we pass other procedures that have what they call unintended consequences. The HIPAA laws in this nation. What can be disclosed to law enforcement? What can be disclosed to the family about a person's medical condition or mental health condition? We have to take a good hard look at those things, and how do we protect our public? Right now, there's no means for law enforcement to track anybody that may be suffering from a mental illness should they walk into a store to buy a gun or something like that. So there's a lot of room for discussion. There's a lot of room for things. But you know what? We have attempted for decades in this nation to legislate crime out of our communities. We pass law after law after law after law because it makes us feel like we're doing something positive. We're having a positive impact on our communities. But the bottom line is we'll never be able to legislate crime out of our communities. We'll never be able to legislate human behavior. You can pass laws, and people like you and I are going to obey those laws because you know what we are? We're law-abiding citizens. The criminal element, you can pass a law, it means nothing to them.
Absolutely.
They're going to violate that law. They're going to circumvent that law, and knowing full well that there are consequences should they get caught, they're going to do it anyway.
Absolutely, and that's why they're called criminals. I wanted to ask you as well in your letter, you hit up on the other topic that's within the context of the Second Amendment and the gun control mania that seems to be engulfing the country. You wrote, world history has shown us that when a society does not possess the ability to defend itself, it becomes ripe for victimization by criminals and ripe for oppression. And you give the examples of Syria and North Korea and Mali. There are a lot of enough people to create some noise about it that seem to find a lot of discomfort in the fact that our Second Amendment wasn't written about hunting or for sport, but it was really written about the last stance against tyranny. What are your thoughts on this, if you could expand a little further?
Well, that's exactly why the Second Amendment was written. That's exactly why it was added to the Bill of Rights, is that our nation had just come out of a revolutionary war. And we fought a war with a government that was oppressive. People were forced to house soldiers in their homes. We have an amendment that addresses that. People were forced to turn over private property. We have an amendment guaranteeing protections against that. People were brutalized by the government, and so we have the Second Amendment. And the intent of the Second Amendment, in my opinion, is for that self-protection. It's not only to protect ourselves from the criminal element, but to protect ourselves from a government that may grow too big and too intrusive and too oppressive.
Amen to that. Sheriff Heiss, I want to thank you for coming on the program today. Thank you for speaking out and writing this letter. And I know that the constituents there in Johnson County, I think, are very fortunate to have someone like you watching over them as sheriff. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Folks, we have your calls coming up, 866-455-9797. I love Missouri sheriffs, I'm telling you. Quick break. Keep it right here. More of The Dana Show when we return.
This is The Dana Show.